everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I am excited to be kicking off our next series. And the focus for our next three topics is going to be today, the beginning of a DA transformation, and then we'll move on to take a look at what some of the challenges are with getting an adoption of DA going. And then we'll conclude with a successful transformation to Discipline Agile. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Anitra Tanner. My tagline for her is full of energy. I had the pleasure of meeting Anitra earlier in the year, and not only does she have a lot of energy, but she actually works for an energy company. So Anitra, thank you for joining us today and sharing a bit of the journey that you and your organization has embarked on.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Joshua. So I am an Agile coach and working in an energy company or a regulated organization. I've been a coach for a few years. Prior to that, I was a senior Scrum Master working on SAFE programs. And prior to that, most of my career has been in project management, a little over 10 years, working in government. Also the Discipline Agile champion for the PMI Metrolina chapter, that's Charlotte, North Carolina and surrounding areas. So along the way, I've taken the opportunity to educate myself, getting a lot of Agile certifications, but the cert path that has really resonated with me the most has been Discipline Agile. I like to call it Agile for real because it's all about agility within your context. And so today I just
real. Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's Agile for real. It's really how you can do agility within your context, wherever you're working, whatever kinds of projects or teams you're working with. So it's been my favorite and it's just awesome. So today I want to share a little bit about how as a coach, I started using Discipline Agile within my organization. The company that I work for is fairly large. About 40,000 employees and contractors. So it's been around over 100 years. I thought this was funny. They started their Agile transformation journey about 4 years ago with a mandate of Agile by 2020. Read this book about doing things in half the time for IT only. So there really wasn't a roadmap for getting there within our context, being regulated and being around for 100 years. And it didn't include a path for our business partners. So that mandate has gone away because, of course, we're not Agile by 2020, whatever that means. But we still have pockets of teams and groups using Agile ways of working, but we still are challenged with, waterfall or legacy practices and legacy mindsets in a large percentage of our enterprise. And usually I'm coaching teams, right? So the focus is on training and role modeling of the Agile mindset and framework practices and delivering working software. But now I'm starting to coach leadership teams who aren't really in that Agile execution space, who still have to meet those long list of governance requirements and budget constraints and green projects, right? So not only would I have to educate on mentor on the mindset and ways of working, but like I had to just put a foot back into a world that I thought I left behind, leaving away those old project management methodologies. So I can really just show empathy for their situation. I'm working with one program in particular. They requested some coaching services. In this business unit that I support, it's one of the most regulated within our organization, really strict adherence to governance, compliance, regulatory rules. They have their own PMO and project controls within the enterprise PMO, just adding more layers and layers of complexity. But, and they were one of the business units who had held off from the Agile by 2020. I think they're one of the last business units that say, hey, we can try this Agile thing and see if it works. So they're just now coming along, 3 or 4 years later. And so in discovery, we found that right away, the conversation was, we're leery about how Agile can work for us, but we've seen other large programs within the organization in action. They're doing great. And we're going to go with SAFE. and we need your help. And I'm like, okay. So I knew that they needed a team of teams approach, right? But with my coaching and safe experience, I already knew that they didn't qualify for minimum requirements to be deemed a train. I think we were about 30 to 35 people, so not quite there. And just to add another layer of complexity to the situation, most of the development team, right, who are going to build these apps and tools, were coming from a very different business unit called the Innovation Center. It's a new thing here at our organization. They're champions of agility. And so they have very, very different ways of working than our leadership team who are in this legacy group. So, as a coach, I knew my coaching should probably be focused first on the leadership team based on some of the questions that I was getting. So, we probably all heard these questions, right? Like, as a project manager, what's going to be my role on this on an agile project? How are we going to align with our traditional governance model? How do we get visibility in what these teams are doing? Because I hear that agile teams kind of, hold the work close to the vest. They won't let us in. Where's our requirements document? How do I do my work breakdown structure? And what about my status report? And so, boy, I was in total transparency because this is a safe place, right? I was a little overwhelmed. And so I needed something to kind of help us deal with this meantime that we were in, where we're trying to work in an agile way, but we're still transforming as an organization, but we still need to be compliant. And so we needed a tool that kind of helps guide us with end-to-end solution delivery. And that's what I love about disciplined agile is like from ideation to close out or transition, we need to be able to help teams deliver a process that works within their context. So I always tell people like out of the sky, right, falls disciplined agile. But I took this Lean Scrum Master class. Thank you, Joshua. And so I knew right away that the toolkit could help us with some of our challenges we were having. And so that's the beauty with DA, right? Is you start with where you are and you evolve. So getting started, I just want to share with you like getting started, some of the challenges that we had and kind of how we overcame those. So our first challenge, role clarity. So getting alignment of roles and responsibilities, right? So how do these traditional roles and the agile teams work together and stay in their respective lanes? It's very key. And it's not a small feat. Like I will tell you, it took several challenging working sessions, but it was necessary. And what it revealed is like traditionally project managers kind of hold the responsibility of product owners, product managers, scrum masters, but discipline agile, people should work in the roles that make sense. So, in every organization, you have those core team roles and supporting roles. So it's just about clearly defining it.
Yep.
And so our outcome is we created a matrix of roles and responsibilities, like at each layer of the value delivery. So from the highest function or capability down to the stories that were being delivered iteratively, right? So for each of the roles, whether it's team member, scrum master, product owner, product manager, project manager, the controls team, everybody knew what their role was at each layer of the value delivery. Um, and so by collaborating on this, visualizing it, um, and allowing the team to take ownership of their roles, it really allowed my coaching to kind of shift and focus more on, trust and empowerment. It allowed that oversight team to do the same, change their narrative, become more of a servant leader to the teams, kind of help drive success through support and empowerment versus command and control. And it was a challenge at first, but just doing this exercise made it crystal clear about who does what at what level of the value delivery.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that well that you mentioned when you first started on roles is that question of I'm a manager of some type, project manager, operational manager,
Mm,
a leadership position, and what am I going to be doing? Because so many of the agile frameworks and just again a lot of the things that people find out in the industry, well, there's not a place for it, but there are so many things that we can use those types of skills and experience, right? We can help to minimize unplanned work, right, that is getting thrust upon the team,
mhm,
or looking at, how to reduce cost of delays, and
Mhm.
the wait time in between, activities and so forth, or some of the localized governance practices that need to change. So yeah, that's such a critical part of, especially at the beginning of a transformation like
Mhm.
we have.
Yes, absolutely. Just getting out of the way of the team and you focusing on, kind of the intake and, impediments and bottlenecks and allowing the team to, have their own way of working and delivery without a lot of input and questions from, where's your velocity reports in? I need this for us to be like this, everybody, you have stuff to do as a project manager or controls. It's not like you just go away on agile projects.
Right.
Our second challenge, this is awesome as well, is how do we work together on those waterfall deliverables and agile execution. And this was a big one for us because when teams come together on a joint effort, they have very different ways of working. So it is imperative. I can't preach this enough that you agree upon and document your ways of working, keep them visible, and continue to evolve them. One of the agile tenets is right. We should own our own processes so we can work effectively together. So we need to not only address like execution or that construction phase of delivery, but really like project management and end-to-end solution delivery. DA gives us process tailoring workshops, and that's one of my favorite things because it takes it from, oh, let's do a team agreement. We focus on definition of ready and definition of done, or just the estimating process, but focusing on how, the leadership team way of working and how we're going to work together as a program.
Right.
In the, excuse me, the toolkit and the process goals, like, were so helpful here because you don't always know all of the decision points that you need to make. So I was able to quickly identify those key decision points that needed to be made with the leadership and provide the some options available that we could experiment with. And that was like so helpful for us. And some of the things that we talk about in this process tailoring workshop are, like, how are we going to share our product roadmap and our priorities? How often are we going to revisit our OKRs? A big one was, what agile governance practices will we adopt? And that was pretty big for us. How are you going to manage, your stakeholder engagement and feedback loops? Like, what makes sense? What about those enterprise technological standards? What metrics and reporting are you going to use? And most importantly, how will they be used? How are you going to, radiate your project status information? Um, Adopting short-term or iterative planning. What are the team norms working virtually? So all of that was identified pretty early, and it helped us be successful without having to go, kind of iterate on those decisions while we're trying to deliver work.
Yep.
So, along with these very significant steps, we continue to use the toolkit, and it enabled us to like create this program specific framework, which is the first time I've done something of the sort. And it provided this business unit, it proved that we can deliver in an agile way while still meeting our regulatory compliance guidelines. And that was huge for this organization and our organization as a whole. I think one senior leader described it as like providing a North Star for disciplined agile in our organization. Like, if this highly regulated, governed group can do it, then anyone can.
Right.
And I think the biggest takeaway was for their project management office, evolving their project reporting and requirements, and because we found ways to meet these requirements with agile deliverables. So with sparking discussions that are going to go to our enterprise PMO. So it's evolving, and we started with where we were and just kept evolving. So that's one key takeaway. Another big surprise for me was other project managers saw, the value add, right? So they're adopting, the mindset, concepts, and some of the practices they're borrowing from, our team and evolving them for themselves. Process tailoring workshops are a big hit. I've been called in on several teams to kind of help them design a project or team specific way of working. So, and still allowing for autonomy for the teams So that's been pretty awesome. And we're getting DA evangelists springing up everywhere. I'm starting to hear more people using even WoW, right? It's a big thing. So it's pretty awesome.
And what an exciting time, right? I mean, when you've had a different way that might have been initially the focus or the directive to go. And again, outside of DA, most are somewhat prescriptive, if not, quite a bit prescriptive. And seeing how powerful it can be to actually go through and in a workshop and start making selections that are more suited for your context and what's appropriate to you. And then you look at if you are in that really heavily regulated area, and yes, if they can do it, anyone can, but the context of the less regulated or non-regulated areas or work initiatives that might not have that same level of regulation,
Mhm.
it can and should be a bit different, right? Some of the practices that we would see the teams choose should more than likely be a bit different.
Right, right. And
Um,
that's the beauty of it.
yeah, and Barbie asks a question: what type of resistance was there when you brought discipline agile to move away from safe?
uh, Probably a few conversations at the leadership level. I think the way we started it was just going with here's the criteria to be safe.
Yeah.
And here's why you need your own customized version of it. Like, yes, you are a team of teams, but you don't have to, go safe. Because in our organization, going safe means bringing in consultants, doing a big trainings, and we just didn't have the budget for it. So budget constraints were were included in that. So we
Yeah.
just said, hey, give us, believe in us, give us the time, and we'll show you how you can create, a team of teams on your own.
Did you have areas in your organization that were like the one that you started to talk about where it didn't kind of really meet the amount of team members, right? It was below sort of that 50 team member threshold that went ahead and still adopted SAFE, even though it might not have been the best fit for them?
I would say not that I know of, because in our organization, if you're going to go safe, then you get a safe coach, which
Oh,
is
okay.
another evolution that we have on our team, is that the coaches are now being more agnostic, like we're not siloed, but you would get a safe coach, and they would, if they ask for safe, they usually come in and do that, checklist of criteria to say, nope, you're not eligible, find another way. But yeah, luckily, no, we didn't have people kind of going off, you know, rogue
Yeah.
safe.
And Dale asks, have you discussed or brought up the minimum business increment approach as part of introducing DA? And if so, how was it received?
Actually, one of the leaders on my team, and this is why it's valuable to have, is he was totally bought into us customizing this, and he had gone off and done his own education on MMPs, so that minimum marketable product. So he marketed it to his leadership team that way.
Hmm.
But we're still partnering up on a lot of things, and he's actually one of those DA evangelists. So I'm giving him information on MBIs, but we used MMP as a way to kind of structure how we wanted to deliver. Because that was one of the things that came out of this, is that your project strategy may need to shift a little bit. You can't just get a project and say, okay, we're going to, go this route. You have to make sure that, you're delivering what you're delivering is making sense if you're trying to do it in an iterative way.
Yeah. Is part of your it, being agile by 2020, and you mentioned you didn't really have an actual sort of transformation roadmap or a solid strategy. Is that beginning to change based on what you're trying to do with DA? That there are some things that would be, accelerators to the coverage you might be able to achieve within the organization.
Yeah, the Agile by 2020 kind of died probably a little bit last year, when we realized, like, one, what does that mean, right?
Right.
What does Agile by 2020 mean? And so we have a coaching capability center, or Agile capability center. That's where all of the coaches sit. And so we've been trying to find out ways to still move the needle, but without having a mandate, a mandate placed on us. So, like I said, we've been, trying to originally adopt more frameworks. So originally everybody it stood everybody up as Scrum. Then we realized, okay, that probably doesn't work. So they added in Kanban and Safe. And then now for 2021, we're looking at a different approach, right? So getting rid of the silos, getting rid of the frameworks, and
Mhm.
really focusing on, value delivery within our context and like using the toolkit added in our toolbox to help us help other teams and other groups within the organization take the next step towards agility.
Yeah, one of the things. So, in last month's webinar series, right, we had Scott Ambler as one of the guests, and one of the things he mentioned was, there is no end state for adopting agile and lean's way of working, right? I mean, you want to become a learning organization, and it's just ongoing. You're always going to experiment and try to do better.
Mhm.
And what I found sometimes is that when you have those types of directives, like we're going to be agile by this date and time, at some point somebody might want to accelerate the amount of coverage of the use of agile, where we get that non-real agile, as you said, where yeah. And that's just a byproduct of that, where you just can only absorb so much change. You have so much adoption infrastructure between coaches and training and funding and all the things that are there, plus the lessons learned that you need to make.
Right.
So
I think we started off as, our metrics were how many teams did you stand up to be agile?
right,
So what's
how
their
many people are
velocity?
going through
Not,
training?
yeah, we
Check that box
trained.
for 1,000 people or 40,000 people through
Yeah,
training.
those are the initial metrics, right? And then
Right.
nobody ever discussed value delivery. Are we still delivering value? We
I don't
got
know, but we got a bunch of people trained. We got a bunch of people saying agile terms.
exactly.
Yeah.
So we're shifting away from that, focus on value delivery and continuous improvement. That's the goal for 2021.
Francisco asks, is there an agile PMO that governs the portfolio initiatives with DA? And how was the transition in main roles for the agile PMO?
Not yet.
Not.
So, so we have agile, what they call deliverables matrix. This is basically how far we've gotten so far. So an agile equivalent to a project management deliverable. But now we're starting with this small effort, and that's why I call it a small effort. It is now bubbling up conversations in our enterprise PMO. So we're starting to have those conversations about how do we even stand up an agility PMO and what that
Mhm.
looks like and what the deliverables are and the OKRs for that. So coming soon, I'm hoping that we'll start to make some headway with that in 2021. But right now we're just grassroots with disciplined agile. My thing was I didn't even mention disciplined agile until they said, "Wow, this is awesome. How are you doing this?" With disciplined agile.
What a great way to bring it in.
Yep.
You've been doing it and didn't even know it.
Right. Well, people are scared of new frameworks, like, oh, another framework I have to learn. So, and DA is not a framework, it's a toolkit. So use it and then tell them your secret weapon later.
Yeah. Daniel asks, did you stand up a community of practice? And if so, how's the discussion between DA and non-DA people?
Yeah. So this year, actually in February, we just stood up an enterprise agility community of practice. Framework agnostic, role agnostic, because previous to that, it was like role based communities of practice. So we wanted to do one for anyone in the enterprise. So right now we're focused on learning generic agile, if you will, and then we're actually planning for 2021 as well to break off our second hour into like DA specific kind of topics. I've presented a couple times on like choosing your way of working and evolving your way of working just to get people, interested.
Yeah.
So we'll do more with our enterprise agility community practice, but not a disciplined agile one specifically.
Interesting. So one of the other questions I've got for you is, not only just choosing your way of working and the types of practices and forming your team and, those types of things, but the bigger selections, right? Like of life cycles.
Yeah.
Do you have teams that are using the agile life cycle versus the lean life cycle? And if so, how's that working out?
So interesting. You brought that up. So in our coaching area, the key, like I said, the key three for us was Scrum, Kanban, and Safe. So as we evolve it, we're starting to get a lot of Kanban teams, but they're not truly Kanban in the way you would think of like a Kanban system, right? We're just trying to get people to visualize their work, etc. And so they probably need to lean more towards the lean, the lean life cycle. But what was surprising to me is that that's all we suggest. We don't look at exploratory, or we never, told people about program approaches where you don't need to have safe. So that's more of where we're going to now is, hey, let's expand, the options. There are more options than just Scrum and Kanban. Like
Yeah.
the team that I was working with, one of the teams start off as Scrum, and after conversations, we realized they should be exploratory because they were building a new organization and they didn't have any answers. It was all discovery. So that was a big breakthrough. So we're looking to add more to the plate, to the options
Yeah,
available.
yeah, and there's so many available. And if you're working in an innovation area, they might have some things they need to figure out, and using something like the exploratory life cycle could be good value.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, as usual, the time always passes just so quickly. We do have some questions we didn't get to,
Mhm.
and Anitra will either maybe write a blog on it, or as you'll see, I'm going to pull up another option, which is a new Discipline Agile community forum, and I am going to share my screen so that I can do a little bit of what's coming. So yes, as a sponsor perspective, please come see Process Mentors if you have any questions on training, assessments, coaching, organizational transformations. And from a training perspective, we have started to deliver the new Discipline Agile Scrum Master training. So PMI, for those of you that might have either attended, or if you didn't, you could always watch on the replay. Mark Lines, the Vice President of Discipline Agile at PMI, talked last month about the new certification journey, some of the things that went into it, the new certifications and corresponding workshops. So we do have a number of the Discipline Agile Scrum Master workshops. Starting in January, we will be doing our first Discipline Agile Senior Scrum Master workshop. And in December and January, one of the things that we're doing that is always a part of our transformation strategy is we do have an Agile and Lean boot camp. And we're finding that that boot camp is a really great option as a sort of a predecessor to the Discipline Agile Scrum Master workshop. So whether you need that or not, we've got a pretty in-depth course description. It's another really good option. It's a lot less courseware and a lot more practical exercises. So it's a little bit different because it is a boot camp. And we will not be doing a webinar next week. We're getting kind of into the time of the year where there's lots of holidays. So we'll take next week off. But on November 18th, we will have Jimmy Washburn coming to speak about the challenges of starting a DAA transformation in a company. And the last thing I want to bring back up is just the community forum that I announced in last month's Ask Me Anything DA. So again, it's a community-based forum. We're seeing a lot of activity. Every day we're seeing new members are joining, and we're starting to see some posts and topics getting put in there. So maybe I'll ask Anitra, because I know that you've joined, if you would be so kind to maybe answer some of the additional questions in the webinars forum. So we'll get a topic up there from a post perspective and answer all the remaining questions. And then also any that maybe you didn't get an opportunity to ask Anitra today. And on that, Anitra, I want to thank you once again for taking the time and sharing your experience. And I'd like to invite you back maybe sometime early next year to give everybody a recap on how well it's going and some of the things that aren't going well, right? Some of the lessons learned that you can share.
Awesome. I would love to. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And thank you for everybody that's either joining us today live or for those of you that are watching this on recording. And we will see you 2 weeks on November 18th. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.